Hi guys, this is a Star Wars The Old Republic free-to-play option Sabotage Spec Gunslinger Ability Guide. The purpose of this guide is to allow you to most effectively play your Sabotage Spec Gunslinger as you level up, while taking into account the limited number of quick slots that you have. There's only 24 as a standard with the free-to-play option, and so if you do not wish to invest any money into expanding that, this is how you can play your Sabotage Spec Gunslinger. You will make some sacrifices, but nothing too major. And really, you can play quite effectively without any trouble. The Sabotage spec is one of the specs in the game of the classes which requires a little bit more abilities and stretches your limits with only 24 quick slots a bit more, but it's still quite doable. I'll explain exactly what you need to do, and I'll explain any major sacrifices or minor ones you're making and why it's perfectly fine to do that. So, the way that I've designed this guide is based on the idea that you'll just train everything as you level up. It would be too complicated for me to tell you at level 1 train this, at level 2 train this, etc. Just train everything. However, I'm going to give you a list of abilities which you can take off your quick bar as soon as you need to. As soon as you find that you need another space, it will be fine to remove these. I'll also give you a couple of abilities you should just not train at all because of reasons which I'll get into, and you can feel perfectly comfortable not training them at all. So, as you level up and you're filling your quick bar out and you're training everything that is offered to you, the first thing that you'll want to take off when you find that you don't have any more room is Blaster Whip. Blaster Whip is an ability which is really mainly for scoundrels. You get it as a smuggler before you choose your gunslinger as your advanced class, but you do not need it at all as a gunslinger. In fact, I don't even put it on my quick bar when I have all the quick bars available to me. Another ability that you'll probably want to remove that you will want to remove as soon as you need extra space is Vital Shot. Vital Shot is an ability which is for dirty fighting spec gunslingers. You can sometimes throw it in as a sharpshooter or sabotage spec gunslinger, but ultimately it's really not that efficient, and there's only a few you might want to do it in operations just to have extra damage taken away because this is damage over time. As for leveling, it's really not necessary, it's really not efficient. Just remove it as soon as you find that you no longer have room for it. Another ability is a much later game ability that you will get at later levels. I guess level 20 actually, it's not that late, I'm sorry, is Hunker Down. Hunker Down is the ability which makes you immune to crowd control. It's a very good ability for PvP, but for leveling and general PvE, it's really not anything you need. So you don't have to worry about that one. And lastly, here's this ability which you can take out, Heroic Moment. Heroic Moment is an ability, every class has one, which is kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card and gives you some extra defense when you really need it if you're taking a beating and you're in risk of dying. It sounds important, and it kind of is. It has a very long cooldown, 20 minutes. You can only use it once every 20 minutes. It can be very, very useful, and you might want to put it on your quick bar, but you don't really need it. And if you really want to have it on there, I'll tell you a little bit later some ways that you can fit it on there. Although as a sabotage spec gunslinger, it's a little bit more difficult than some of the other classes and specs which you might play. Another thing to keep in mind is sprint. When you train sprint, simply remove sprint from your quick bar. You do not need it. It's a toggle. Once you activate it, it's on permanently. If for some reason it ever turns off, just press the P button. It'll bring you to the abilities menu. You can reactivate it from there, and it's fine. You don't need it on your quick bar. Another ability that as a gunslinger you'll have, which I'll mention in case you're not aware of it, is Take Cover. Take Cover will initially show up on your quick bar at the beginning of the when you first get the character, it's bugged, or at least it has been in the past, and it's really not the most efficient way to take cover anyway. Taking cover is a mechanic that scoundrels and gunslingers use, where you kneel down to take cover from fire. You want to take this off your quick bar. It's much better to go into the keybinds, and you can keybind a dedicated key to take cover. It works more consistently, it works better, and it doesn't take up a quick slot bar. The other thing that I'd recommend, and that my guide is based around, is gunslingers have a unique ability across the entire game called a cover bar. It's a bar which only pops up when you're in cover and allows you to have different abilities. On my Gunslinger, as a subscriber, I do not use the cover bar. You can turn it off in the options. I suggest doing so. I find it to be too cumbersome to try to arrange two different sets of bars and to remember the differences between being in cover and out of cover, and I just think it's simpler, and it's really not even necessary to have it. So I'm giving you a guide explaining how to do things without it. If you really like it, you actually have a little bit more options, and you can probably fit a couple of more abilities on there, but it's not really all that necessary. Now, as for these abilities, which I said you should not train at all, I'll mention them to you right now. The first is Cheap Shot, and the second is Headshot. They're basically two versions of the same ability. Cheap Shot is the melee version, Headshot is the ranged version. They're high damage abilities, but which can only be used against targets which have been stunned, and can only be used against weak, standard, or strong enemies. These are your run-of-the-mill enemies that you shouldn't have trouble with anyway. It's not able to be used on elite and champion level enemies, which are the ones you'd really want such a high damage ability to use against. Every class basically has one of these kinds of abilities, which is only usable on the weaker enemies and requires them to be stunned. I don't train it. I never even buy it on any of my characters. I consider it a waste of money. It's completely unnecessary. It doesn't fit into any standard rotations. It's just kind of an ability to throw in there. If you really want to, I'll get into a little bit later ways you can try to fit a couple of extra abilities in there. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. So, as you level up, you're going to find that there's a couple of abilities I did not mention which you're going to want to put on your bar. The first is you're going to want to put Recuperate on your bar. Recuperate is the recovery ability of the smuggler. Every class has a Recuperate ability. This one is called Recuperate, which allows you to rapidly regenerate health while out of combat, so you can be full health and move along more quickly. It's very useful to have on your quick bar. You'll probably want it. Secondly, you'll probably want to put your mount, your speeder, on the quick bar. It's very useful to have on there. It's much more cumbersome to keep it in the abilities menu. And as I said, you might want to even put Heroic Moment on your quick slot bar. So, how can you fit them on? Well, this is what I'll say. As you level up, if you find that you do not have room but would really like to put these abilities on there, these are the ones I'd suggest taking off. Maybe you'll pick a different one. These are my suggestions. The first is Aimed Shot. Aimed Shot is a very long cast ability. It's high damage, but it takes a very long time to fire. It's really intended for use in the sharpshooter spec, where there is certain skills that you choose which make it fire much more quickly. It's really not necessary for Saboteur. You can use it, but I wouldn't recommend having it if you really feel something else is better. Another ability which you may want to consider removing if you need room for something is Flourish Shot. Flourish Shot is actually somewhat of an important ability. It reduces the target's armor and cuts down on any healing it might receive. It's especially important in PvP. But for leveling, it's something which you can sacrifice. This is one of the bigger sacrifices that any class is going to have to make to fit something extra onto their quick slot bars. So if you really want it, you may want to figure out a way to use the cover bar. but it's not so central that I feel you absolutely must have it, especially as a Saboteur spec. I find it to be much better on Sharpshooter because as a Saboteur, a tremendous amount of your damage is damage over time damage, which is not mitigated by armor anyway, so you're not giving up nearly as much as a Sabotage spec Gunslinger with Flourish Shot as you would be as Sharpshooter. It reduces the target's armor, but most of your abilities don't even worry about armor anyway. Lastly, I'd say Excess Freighter Flyby you could take off. This is a really cool ability. It's an incredibly high damage, massive AoE damage. Again, really good in late game PvE, in PvP, and pretty cool to use in leveling too, but you don't get it until level 48, and you have other AoEs, and this one does take a long time to cast as well, so you could take it off. Your other option might be to take off Sweeping Gunfire, which is your other AoE ability. It does less damage, but it's quicker to fire. It overall is kind of more useful. You're going to be able to use it more often. It's up to you, but these are the ones I'd say not to have on your bar. And lastly, Vital Shot as a gunslinger, as a Sabotage spec Gunslinger. If you do have it on there, I think I mentioned that you should be taking that off anyways, but just in case I forgot, that's one you should certainly be taking off as a Sabotage spec. So, now let's get into the skill build. How do you build yourself as a Sabotage spec Gunslinger? I've designed this build to take into account the quick bars, the limitations. I've also designed it level by level. I'm going to show you how to put things on there at each level. It's not that different from your average standard Sabotage spec build that you would see anywhere else. It might not be different from many of them at all. But if there's anything which I feel, as I explain it, that is different, I'll give you an explanation as to why. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through and show you which points to put on when, and you can read about them and see what they do. So, at level 10, when you get to put on your very first ability, I would suggest you put it on Bravado. Fill that out as you hit level 10 and 11, and then at level 12 and 13, Saboteur's Utility Belt, then 1 point into Streetwise. As you move on, and you go level by level, Independent Anarchy, fill it out all the way, fill out Pandemonium all the way, and then Shock Charge. This is another ability which will go onto your bar, and you should have room if you follow the suggestions I've made. Fill out Dealer's Discount next, then Contingency Charges. Put your point in Insurrection. Go over and use Hot Pursuit. I'll note one thing. In my other two Gunslinger videos, Sharpshooter and Dirty Fighting Spec, I said to take Quick Shot off of your bar when you run out of space. I did not say to do that for Saboteur, because this ability makes Quick Shot a very useful ability. Every time you leave cover, you have 6 seconds to fire it as much as you want for free without using energy at all. And it's a reasonably high damage ability. It's normally more of a scoundrel ability, but Sabotage spec Gunslingers use it. Here's the skill that makes you use it and allows you to use it effectively. That's why I said to keep it. Moving on, put your points into Arsonist and then Sabotage. Sabotage is another ability. It will go on your quick slot bar. Go ahead and take Seize the Moment, Hotwired Defenses, Blazing Speed, Riot Screen, and Incendiary Grenade, which is another ability which will go on your bars. Next, move down here, do Steady Shots, finish Streetwise. I did not finish it earlier because it's more useful to get all the way up here first, and you need a certain number of points to move up to the next level. Now that you're all done with this, and you've gotten this, which is going to give you a significant damage boost, it's worth finishing Streetwise. Go over and take a cover screen. Sabotage spec Gunslinger is already a very defensive-oriented Gunslinger spec. This is a little bit more defense, and so it fits right in, and it's going to be especially good as a free-to-player when you might be concerned about having to res at a waypoint if you should die somehow. Extra defense is always good. Move over, pick up No Holds Barred, and finally, you have 1 point left. Put it into black market mods. There might be a few things here or there where one person or another might suggest something else, but this is fairly standard for a Saboteur spec gunslinger, and it's what I suggest. One other option you could use is you could go ahead and take a point off of that and take a point off of this, No Holds Barred and black market mods, and put them in Cool Under Pressure, which allows you to have a heal on one of your abilities. It turns one of your abilities into a heal. So if you'd like to have a little heal, it's only 6% of your health, so it's not much, but it's something, then you can go ahead and you can do that. So that's the Saboteur Spec Gunslinger build and the Saboteur Spec Gunslinger ability level by level guide, what to take off. You can click the link below the video for the full text guide, which will go over this and note things in a way you can simply read level by level. And if you'd like to consider sharpshooter or dirty fighting, you can go ahead and check out the other videos. There are also going to be other videos for every single spec in every single advanced class. That's all for now. So thank you very much, and have fun.